So the DLC season has passed and now we're back to regular uploads, but of course it's the festive season, so we should do something festive, which reminds me. There we are, got my Santa shirt on, ready to go. Pop that on green. Looks festive in here already, I'm ready for the Christmas time. So as you might be able to tell from the title of this video, this is a Warhammer 2 buyer's guide for the holiday season of 2020. If you're wondering what that means, there's like 16 pieces of paid DLC for Warhammer 1 and 2, which, let's be honest, they're basically for Warhammer 2 at this point. So I thought I'd break down which pieces of this DLC are worth your money if you can only buy a couple of them, because I know it can be ridiculously expensive trying to complete the collection all at once. Also, you know, it's the holiday season, so there's probably going to be a sale on at some point, and some people might be wondering what gift to get you, / you might be wondering what gift to get yourself. So I just thought I'd make this video to just try and make that whole decision-making process easier, because I know that when you're thinking, oh my god, which one do I buy, it can be very overwhelming, and you just need a video that's like, okay, these are the ones that are good, these are the ones that are bad, and these are the ones that are kind of in the middle. So in this video, I will be putting every single DLC into one of 3 categories. These categories are as follows. Must buys. Now these are the pieces of DLC that you just cannot go wrong. You get these DLC, it feels like the game is more complete because of them. You should always get these. If you don't own them, then it's not even a question. Just buy these ones before you get anything else because they make the game so much better. The second category is still good but not essential. Now this is where the majority of the DLC will lay, because I'm not going to lie to you, most of the DLC for Warhammer 1 and 2 is not bad. In fact, I would say the majority of it is pretty good. This category is going to contain the most items, but don't worry, I'll give you some personal recommendations at the end. And of course, the final dreaded category is avoid at all costs unless you're trying to collect. Now, you know, I own all the DLC, but it's purely because I like to, you know, I like to just see it complete. It really makes me happy. And of course, you know, I make videos for the game, so it kind of makes sense. But if you're just casual into the game and you just want to get the good piece of DLC, then I would say avoid these pieces because there's not really any point to them. It's either factions that are out of date and needed rework terribly, or it's just DLC that is completely pointless. I think we all know what I'm talking about here, don't we? Before we get into anything, I want to stress to you that this is just based on my opinions. These are not facts, and while my opinions may sometimes be quite accurate, and on some of the DLC, particularly the lower end, these are still my opinions. So if I say a DLC is terrible and you like it, then that doesn't mean you are wrong. It just means that it's my opinion and that's your opinion. If I like a piece of DLC and you don't like it, it's just opinions, man. Don't take anything personally. Also, since there's so much to get through, I cannot do a review of every single piece of DLC in this video. I'm just going to give you the spark notes on them, give you some rough ideas as to what you're getting, and we'll just take it from there rather than go into a full review. But if you do want to see reviews on every single piece of DLC, then, you know, be sure to leave that in comments, like the video. I'll even put a poll in one of the corners and, you know, vote on that, because I'd be more than happy to do reviews on every single piece of DLC. But, you know, we of course need to get through the guides first. Speaking of which, also, some of these pieces of DLC bring you whole new races into the game. So, you know, if you are looking at some of these guys thinking, oh, well, I kind of want to try this race, but, you know, I've never really played them before, chances are I have a guide of how to do them on the channel. So go and click through into the channel and literally just search the race guide or the faction guide playlist, and it's got every single faction apart from Norska, the Wood Elves, and the Beastmen at this point. So yes, go check that out and I would appreciate it very much. All right, without further ado, let's get going because there is a lot of DLC to get through. Okay, starting with the must-haves. Now, I said this in my last top 10 DLC video, but the most essential piece of DLC that you can buy is Warhammer 1. And I know Warhammer 1 is not technically a DLC, but let's be honest, at this point, who owns Warhammer 1 who doesn't already own Warhammer 2? Like, you don't buy Warhammer 2 and then, like, buy Warhammer 1 and play it separately. No, you buy Warhammer 1 so you can get Mortal Empires and Warhammer 2. Okay, it's just how it works. So buying Warhammer 1 while you own Warhammer 2, of course, gets you Mortal Empires, which is the massive sandbox campaign that everybody loves. It gets you 4 new races, it gets you the Empire, it gets you the Dwarves, it gets you the Greenskins, which have been reworked this year, and they're a really good place right now. And it also gets you the Vampire Counts, who are my personal favorite, so you need to own Warhammer 1 if you own Warhammer 2 before anything else, because Mortal Empires is amazing. On top of this, another reason why you shouldn't own this is because when Warhammer 3 comes out, if it ever does, they've already said that they are going to do a Mortal Empires 2, so that'll be the Warhammer 2 map, the Warhammer 1 map, and the Warhammer 3 map all mushed into one. Hey, didn't I mention the regular Mortal Empires map is both games maps mushed into one? It is huge. There's a bajillion settlement. Okay, it's not bajillion, but there's a lot of settlements, okay, and there's a lot of factions. The turn timers, not as long as they used to be. It's really fun. You should definitely give it a try if you have not yet. Second piece of essential DLC that you must buy and you cannot go wrong is buying the Prophet and the Warlock. And I know what you're thinking. Tenowin isn't really that good. And yeah, you're right. Tenowin, he is not really that good. And his faction, it's not great. The units he brings are they're all right, but his faction is not that great. Let me tell you why it is so essential. Ikit Claw and weapons teams. Now, the weapons teams units changed the Skaven meta forever. Before, the Skaven were just kind of a faction. They were in a weird place, if you ask me. You know, they had the ambush mechanic and they were kind of decent at it, but their army just didn't really have the, you know, the gusto that a lot of the regular armies do. With the weapons teams, however, all that changes. You get rats with miniguns. You don't say anymore. You get rats with sniper rifles. Incredible. You get Doom Flayers, which are kind of like little Doom Wheels that run around in packs and just do so much damage. You get Warlock Masters, which improve pretty much all the units in this DLC and make them even more overpowered, and can also get a Doom Flayer or a Doom Wheel as a mount. So very, very good. In fact, when I was playing, I had pretty much all of these lead my armies because, well, they were the best Lord choice at the time, and to be honest, yeah, they still are. Every single unit that comes with Ikit Claw himself, who, by the way, is also incredible, is fantastic. So you should definitely buy this DLC if you like the Skaven. If you don't like the Skaven at all, it's not incredible, okay? I've had to categorize these a little bit weird, but if you even vaguely like the Skaven, buy this DLC. It is incredible. I don't want to source on Lizardmen too much because 10 wins campaign is kind of whack. It's really difficult. It's not really the best. But the units that it does bring are not too bad, particularly the Engine of the Gods, Stegodon. It is bananas. This thing, you've of course seen it. It's that massive laser that comes down from the sky. It is incredible. Buying this DLC, it lets you put the wizards on a mount of one of these things. They do so much damage. On top of this, you get salamanders, which are fantastic at buffing the range department of the Lizardmen, which is exactly where they struggle. Fantastic units, okay? All around this DLC, you get great units. I need to stop talking about it. I need to move on because we're like 10 minutes in and we've done 2 DLCs. The third piece of DLC that I would consider essential under specific circumstances, if you do not want to buy Warhammer 1, buy the Hunter and the Beast, because you get the most popular faction in a Total War Warhammer history, which is, of course, the Empire of Man. You get Marcus Wolfheart in the Vortex campaign, and honestly, his campaign is one of the most fun campaigns I've had in the Vortex. Okay, it starts out in Lustria, and Lustria, as we all know, is a hellhole. It's full of legendary lords, but when you're playing as Marcus Wolfheart, that's exactly how it should be. You are the invader, but yes, you are starting an expansion into Lustria, and it's a hellhole. There's loads of legendary lords coming after you, but it's so much fun. It's a great quest line, picking up loads of heroes. The units that you get with the DLC, they're not too great. You know, the archers are okay, the huntsmen are okay, the mortars are in the carriages, they're not too good, and the war wagons themselves aren't fantastic, but you get that fantastic, like, minigun, Hellblaster, rocket gun. It's fantastic. The Lizardmen side is kind of weak, I'm not going to lie to you. You know, Nakai is basically a big bowling ball himself. He brings some okay units, including the Feral Dreadsaurian, which is fantastic. It is hugely terrifying, but it's also huge, so a massive range tag. It's not incredible there. But purely for getting the Empire into the Vortex campaign, if you don't already own Warhammer 1 and you want to play the Empire, then pick up this DLC. It's pretty much essential. If you already own Warhammer 1, then it might not be as essential, okay? I'm gonna have to play loosey-goosey here. Otherwise, the only thing that would be essential is Warhammer 1. Right, now moving on to the good but not essential pieces of DLC, in my opinion. Now, as I mentioned at the start, this is where the majority of the DLC is going to lay, so I'm going to try and get through this as quickly as possible. First up, we have the Realm of the Wood Elves. Now, all race packs are going to basically boil down to if you want to try that sort of playstyle. So I'm going to quickly explain the playstyle of the Wood Elves. Just been reworked, by the way, so they're really good. And let me know if you like it, and then you can give them a try. The new reworked Wood Elves are based around forest health. There are several magical forests around the map. I'm sure you've seen them if you've ever played Mortal Empire since the update has come out. And what you basically need to do is heal these forests by doing a series of tasks that I've mentioned in lots of videos that I've done those past couple of weeks. So just scroll through the channel if you want to find those. And once you've healed all this forest enough, Athelorn, which is the main magical forest, will be restored, and you'll get to do a fantastic ritual of rebirth and bring it back into the power that it always needed to be, and then do the defense of the Oak Battle, and then win your campaign. Now in Battle, their strategy is all based around their range units and maneuvering around very carefully. They have nearly unrivaled range capabilities, with Waystalkers being one of the most deadly ranged units in the game, apart from Sisters of Avalon. All around, those units are going to be doing the majority of your damage. They have a decent front line, but it's nothing to write home about. They have a couple of Tree Spirit units, which can be very interesting. You've got the Ancient Treemen, the Treekin, and the Dryads. Of course, they have a couple of Cav units, including some unique deer mounted guys, which are very, very cool indeed, as well as a couple of flying units, and of course a forest dragon. All in all, since the rework, they're actually a really fun race to play, even if you don't own the Twist and the Twilight DLC. One thing to note about the Realm of the Wood Elves, since they are Warhammer 1 DLC, if you want to play them, you will need to already own Warhammer 1 as well as Warhammer 2, so that you can play them in the Mortal Empires campaign. If you don't, you're just going to be buying DLC for a game that you don't own, and it's going to be very strange. Speaking of which, the Twist and the Twilight DLC is also in here. Now, this is, of course, the most recent DLC to enter Warhammer 2. If you want to know anything about this, I've done loads of videos over the last couple of weeks. Genuinely, I've done like 8 videos on it, so go watch those. I'm going to keep this super brief. Basically, you get the Sisters of Twilight, which are basically 2 people from one mind. Very, very cool. They lead the Heralds of Aeril, which basically fill up another of the magical forests on the Mortal Empires map, and one of the 4 magical forests on the Vortex map. Their campaign gameplay is pretty much the same as the regular Wood Elves, as I just mentioned, you know, heal up the magical forest, Athelorn, you know the biz. Their faction mechanic is they get loads of items from Daith. I believe this is kind of getting some tweaks because the community isn't too happy with it, so you'll have to stay tuned to CA for that. But for now, you just get items and upgrade them to legendary status eventually. So, you know, nothing to write home about there. We did come with the Wood Elf rework, so you can kind of see why they're not getting too much detail. Now, the other faction you're getting a hold of is Clan Mulder for the Skaven. Another fantastic Skaven faction right here. It's all based around monsters, mutating every single unit in your faction to make it into a monster, and then just recycling them to get more growth juice to get more monsters. It's really, really fun playstyle in the campaign. In Battle, as I mentioned, monster focus. He brings a bunch of monster units with him, as well as heroes that improve monster performance in Battle, as well as a legendary hero, which is half monster and half Norscan Berserker in the mind. It's pretty crazy. and it's honestly one of the most fun Skaven mechanics and Skaven factions that I've played in recent memory. Definitely go for this one if you're even vaguely interested in the Skaven, and if you want another Wood Elf Lord to play. Also worth mentioning, if you don't own the Realm of the Wood Elves and you want to play the Wood Elves, this is the cheapest option to do it. Yes, you're not getting Orion or Durthu or Dryka, but you are getting the Sister Twilight, and you can do pretty much everything that Orion and Durthu can do, with the only exception being you can't really use them as legendary lords, but if you can federate them, you'll probably be able to do it anyway. Next up, we have the Warden and the Paunch, which is the second most recent DLC for Warhammer 2, and it is the site of the peak players of Warhammer 2 of all time. It was also when Mandlord Gaming did his review, so that kind of boosted it up a little bit. But needless to say, this DLC brought a lot of people back into Warhammer 2, and it kind of helped that we're in lockdown, so, you know, everyone was just kind of home playing it anyway. But nevertheless, it's a really good DLC. So this DLC features Eltharion the Grim of the High Elves versus Grom the Paunch from the Greenskins. And the same thing I said with the Twist in the Twilight, if you want to get a hold of the Greenskins in Warhammer 2 without buying Warhammer 1, which is more expensive if you don't get a deal, then this is definitely the way to go, because you get Grom the Paunch, all his new units, as well as all the base units for the Greenskins, but only the Vortex campaign. Also worth knowing that with this DLC, the Greenskins got a massive rework, so are currently one of the most powerful factions in the game. They have taken on the Empire before, and they will surely do it again. Now, the High Elf faction that you get is arguably one of the most unique. It's completely based around building up this under-settlement, which is called Athel Tamara, if I can remember correctly. And it's really, really neat. It unlocks you all sorts of cool bonuses. You can interrogate enemy lords. You can get unique units that no other High Elf faction can get. It's a really unique way to play the High Elves, and it's actually one of the more challenging High Elf campaigns because the majority of them are kind of easy. I'm talking about you, Tyrion. It also comes with some really great units. You get Spellcast Lords, you get more varied early game front lines, you get frickin' lines, and the best Phoenix in the game. As I keep mentioning, one of the best High Elf factions, if you ask me. Now, as for Grom the Paunch from the Greenskins, his faction mechanic is all about searching the world and finding different ingredients to make different food to buff the faction. And yes, it is as fun as it sounds, creating different recipes, seeing what the effects are, tweaking the recipe next time to get slightly different effects to buff the faction in different ways that are specific to you. It is really lots of fun, and it encourages you to travel the map, which is one of my favorite things that a mechanic can do. It forces you to explore the map and do every single thing that you can. It just makes it a lot of fun and makes it so that if you want to get the most out of that mechanic, you're going to be doing a lot of things in the campaign. You're going to be very busy. So yes, definitely great there. Now, as for the units that come with the Greenskins, you get a bunch of wagon units, which are just kind of like chariots. You also get some new trolls, which improve on the weaker base unit. And finally, you get the Rogue Idol, which is just a massive behemoth of stone, which is held together by magic. They are a beauty to behold in battle and can do devastating damage. So yes, if you have even a vague interest in either the Greenskins or the Howls, this is definitely a great pick for you. And as I mentioned, if you don't know Warhammer 1 and you want to try out the Greenskins, this DLC is a great way to do it without buying Warhammer 1. Next up, we have the Shadow and the Blade, which is the third most recent of the Warhammer 2 DLCs. I'm kind of going through these in date order, I don't know if you noticed. It's just how it's kind of ended up. It features the legendary Skaven assassin Deathmaster Snitch, alongside the most edgy and unstable of all the Dark Elf Lords, Malus Darkblade. Yes, I'm not making up that name. Now, both have excellently themed campaigns that fit totally with their personal playstyles and personalities. Deathmaster Snitch's campaign revolves totally around doing sneaky dealings, netting deals with the other Skaven clans. Fulfilling assassination requests for the Council of the Nine is completely based around being a sneaky assassin and sending off Deathmaster Snitch and your other assassins to do missions to increase the faction's favor and unlock different units, because otherwise you are limited to units within your own sub-faction. So it's a very unique playstyle that forces you to choose which units you want to get. So, you know, if you want to get the weapons teams, then you have to do work for Clan Scry. As for his units, he gets something which, if you ask me, sounds like it belongs with Ikithol, but somehow it belongs to this guy. He gets Poisoned Wind Mortars, which are essentially Skaven rats with backpacks, which are basically giant mortars that launch poison wind globes. It's as simple as that, and they are devastating. They are one of the most overpowered ranged infantry units in the entire game, if you ask me. Which is totally fitting with this game because, you know, they didn't have enough of those. Of course, they have Snitch himself, which is kind of unique as he is literally a character assassin. Just put him on the enemy lord or their hero, and 9 times out of 10, he's going to come out the victor, and they are not going to get away. You also get a new Law of Magic with the Eshin Sorcerer, as well as a new Law type in the Master Assassins. You also get Eshin Triad Spear units, which are just kind of a sneaky spear unit that I can't really work out how to use, but I'm sure they're good in some way. People have told me that they're good. I'll just have to take the word for it. And finally, they also get Warp Grinders, which are essentially rats with giant warpstone drills. Who doesn't want that? As for Malus Darkblade, he is constantly fighting the possession, and managing how bad or how good it is really a major factor in how the campaign will play out. If you let it take over, then yes, you will unlock the power of the demon, and he will establish dominance over your entire faction and your enemies. But, you know, being led by a demon isn't too good for public order, so they will start to suffer. Whereas if you choose to keep Malus in control, then yes, he will establish more calm over your entire faction, and the public order will be improved. But at what cost? He will be less effective in battle because he is just so subdued from all of the demon suppression medicine, or whatever you call it. As for units, Malice himself is neato with that dual personality carrying over into the battlefield. What you can essentially do is send Malice in, wait till he's about to die, and then summon Zarkan to take possession of him, and it will essentially give you a second Lord because he just gets all his health and vigor back. It's pretty bananas if you ask me, but it's there and it's very powerful. It also comes with a couple of Bloodrack units, which are basically Medusas, either by themselves or on a shrine. Both units are great at multi-class, so they can do devastating range damage, whilst also being effective in the front lines, either with direct damage or debuffs and buffs for your units. You also get Scourger and a Chariot, which, you know, Chariot units, I don't really know anything about, but I've heard they're pretty good, as well as a new hero and a new Lord type, as well as the usual bunch of ROR. Overall, it's a decent enough DLC, but the Lords and the factions that come with them are kind of difficult, so if you're not totally comfortable with either the Skaven or the Dark Elves, then I would say leave this until you've got a little bit more comfortable with both of them and you're thinking, you know what, I want a challenge. Then pick up this DLC because it will definitely give you it. Next up, we have the Curse of the Vampire Coast, and the Vampirates play exactly how you would expect them to. The roster in battle is focused on gunpowder units and undead, under the water monster units. And honestly, cinematically, they're one of the best factions in the game to watch fight. Now, the campaign mechanics are on point with how Vampires should play, with one exception. This exception is you can take settlements. It seems to work so much better if you play them as a horde faction. I'm not going to complain about taking settlements, it's just steady income, so, you know, you can't really complain about it too much. Aside from that, you can build up pirate ships on some of your legendary lords. These pirate ships allow you to locally recruit without being in the settlement, and honestly, it is ridiculously overpowered. You can just build up a ship, and then you get Necrofest Colossi spam by like turn 30 or something stupid. You can go off on quests to dig up buried treasure, which, you know, every pirate's dream. You can even find the verses to a legendary sea shanty, which will improve your units in battle. As I mentioned, these are one of the best themed factions in the entire game, but that doesn't mean that they're one of the best factions in the entire game. In fact, I would say that they are just terribly mediocre. You know, the gunpowder units are okay, but the gunpowder units, you know, if you come across anything that's got loads of flying units or loads of cav, you're just going to get decimated. So you do have to play them in a very specific way. If you really enjoyed Total War Empire, then you might enjoy playing this, but if you didn't, then you might not be too bothered about these guys. Nevertheless, they're a very fun faction, and they do feel like a complete faction. Doesn't really feel like there's too much missing from them. So in conclusion, if you like gunpowder and plundering booty, then this is the faction for you. Next up, we have the Rise of the Tomb Kings DLC. Now, these guys have one of the most unique economies that you'll see in any faction in the game. None of their units cost any upkeep or recruitment, so you can recruit as many units as you want, but you are also very limited. You can only have a certain number of lords, depending on your research tree. You can only have a certain number of units, depending on how many of a certain building type that you have. So pretty much anything that's above a skeleton spearman will require you to have a building that increases the capacity of that specific unit. Otherwise, you won't be able to get any more. Now, this does encourage you to have a lot of army variety because it's nearly impossible to just get the same army spout every single time, very restricting your entire empire to build these buildings. On the flip side of this, it does allow you to locally and globally recruit at a fantastic rate because there's no money holding you back, so you can just get your armies full and send them out. Now, their roster is of course packed with a bunch of skeletons as well as fantastic constructs, which are again held together by magic. Now, these constructs will be the carriers of your army in the late game, but for the early game, don't be surprised if it's just a bunch of skeleton spam. If you liked the Vampire Counter in the Vampire Coast, then you'll probably like these guys because they're still undead, but they've just got a different flavor on them, you know, it's a little twist. For me personally, I quite like the twist. Next up, we have Norska, and they are actually the faction I'm playing to make a new guide for, so if you want to see that guide, make sure to subscribe to the channel so that you do not miss it, because it should be coming fairly soon. Now, they are a Warhammer 1 DLC, so as I mentioned with the Wood Elves, you will need to own both Warhammer 1 and Warhammer 2 and this DLC to be able to use them. And yes, I know that's a bit of a commitment, but it's just the way it is. Now, they haven't really been changed since launch, so you would think, these guys aren't going to be too good. But on the contrary, they're actually really strong and do hold up somehow, even though they have not been changed in years. Every single game I play, consistently, they are within some of the most powerful factions, especially in the early game. And even into the late game, they're always sticking around and doing a bunch of harassment to everyone. They introduced the tribe leader mechanic, which is a new way to expand in the early game. We basically just go and hunt faction leaders and then confederate them from there. Now, their roster is full of monsters and monster hunters, and it is a really unique playstyle that they have. And you know, they stand up decently even against some of the most powerful factions in Warhammer 2. And for a Warhammer 1 faction, that is incredibly impressive. So if you like raiding and you like taking on the other side, then you will enjoy these guys because they are essentially the Vikings of the Warhammer world. Next up, we have the Queen and the Crone. I'm going to have to start rattling through these because goddamn, we've been recording for like 34 minutes. So with this DLC, you get Queen Alarielle as well as Crone Helbron. Now, first and foremost, with Alarielle, you get the Sisters of Avalon. If you don't know what the Sisters of Avalon are, they're the most overpowered unit in the entire High Elves roster. Fantastic ranged infantry. If you don't know about them, then you've not been playing Warhammer 2 so long, clearly, because these guys are bananas. I mean, along with these guys, you also get Shadow Warriors, but let's be honest, they kind of belong to a Lifnar. And you get Handmaidens, which are kind of like single entity hero units of Sisters of Avalon, but I've never really found a use for them, to be honest. And of course, you get Alarielle herself, who is a super powerful spellcaster. She also has a deep connection with nature, which allows her to recruit certain Wood Elf units. So if you want to dip your toes into the Wood Elves without going head first, then this is a good way to do it. Now, her campaign is kind of similar to Tyrion since she also starts in the center of the donut, but she does have a super strong focus on uniting Ulthuan and getting that donut completely under high elf control. When she gets that, then she gets a bunch of bonuses. But when chaos comes, she gets a bunch of debuffs because she don't like chaos. And I know none of us do, but Ilariel particularly, oh boy, she don't like him. Now, as for Crone Hellbrun, the best units that come with her have to be the new Spellcaster Lord types. I mean, you can have spells in your Lord leaders. Can we get a Hallelujah? Because that is just fantastic. On top of this, she also brings Cysts of Slaughter, which are pretty good with poison, high physical resist, as well as a super high melee defense, making them into one of the most deceptively sturdy units in the game. Her campaign and herself revolves around Death Knights, which are basically just festivals where they slaughter a bunch of Dark Elf slaves. Now, doing these will make Hellbrun even stronger and help progress your campaign at an accelerated rate. Now, overall, this DLC, if you ask me, is propped up by the Cysts of Avalon. You know, they are the best unit in the High Elves by a country mile. So owning this DLC makes the High Elves into even more of a superpower when you're playing as them. So it's kind of a no-brainer if you like the High Elves to definitely pick this up. I mean, you'll still enjoy Ilariel, but the Cysts of Avalon will just carry the faction. If you're not too interested, then I can personally see this being one of those I would just consider thinking, you know, it's not really worth it. There's not enough in here to entice me. But, you know, as usual, it's all down to your personal preference. So if you like Ilariel, you like Cysts of Avalon, you like Crone Hellbrun, then go right ahead, buddy. Now, the final DLC at this category is the King, the Warlord. Now, this is one of the most difficult DLCs to date, and it's a Warhammer 1 DLC. I think I kind of realized making DLCs this hard, not the best. People tend to get a little bit, oh, I can't play the DLC because, you know, I can't get the most out of it because I can't play it because it's really difficult. But nevertheless, it does bring a lot of content. So both the Dwarf and the Greenskin campaigns are focused around Karak 8 Peaks and trying to take it. And before you take it, both these factions will be supremely debuffed. For the Dwarves, they will get massive upkeep increases to all of their units until they take Karak 8 Peaks. And I don't need to tell you that the Dwarves are already one of the most expensive factions to upkeep in the game. Now, as for the Greenskins, if they don't take Karak 8 Peaks, they can only recruit Goblin units. And we all know that Goblin units, while they are pretty cute, they're not as overpowered as Orc units. Now, campaign gripes aside, the new units that these guys bring are actually pretty interesting. They're also a lot of fun. For the Greenskins, you get Night Goblin War Bosses, which buff Goblin units to alleviate some of the struggle fest of the early game. But other than that, they are kind of useless. I've never found a use for them personally. You also get Squig Herds and Squig Hoppers, which are basically these little round dudes, both with and without riders, and they both make for decent early game cav alternatives. You also get Nasty Skulkers, which are basically sneaky little goblins that do good AP damage, but are not really meant to be your front line since they want to be flanking the enemy. As for the Dwarves, you get Rune Lords, which are the closest you'll get to a Spellcast Lord in the Dwarves. They're basically a Runesmith, but a Lord version. You also get Bugman's Rangers, which are better versions of Quarrelers due to drinking some ridiculously strong ale. And no, I'm not joking. And finally, you get Bolt Throwers, which are a giant ballista, pretty much. You know, they're decent for the early game, but aside from that, they're just okay. In conclusion, this DLC, the campaign side, super difficult, if you ask me. You know, there's people that probably can do it really easily, but for your boy here and for the average Joe player that, you know, has only just started playing Warhammer 2, it can be quite difficult to pick these guys up. And also, worth mentioning, you need Warhammer 1 and Warhammer 2 to earn these guys, so, you know, it's kind of hard to warrant buying them if you just own Warhammer 2. But nevertheless, units you get with this DLC are really fun, so if you like the Dwarves and the Greenskins and you want to bolster the roster even more with some either Goblin units or some Drunk Dwarves, then be sure to pick this one up. Okay, so while editing this video, I realized that I forgot to mention the Grim the Grave, so I'll quickly go over that now. You get Volkmar the Grim from the Empire, who is the head of the Cult of Sigmar, and is one of the most powerful religious leaders in the entire of the Empire. With him, you get Free Company Militia, which are a great multi-class unit, you get Flagellants, which are basically just chaff, and you get Knights of the Blazing Sun. As well as this, you get the new Arch-Lector Lord type, which can use Battle Prayers instead of spells. On the Vampire Count side, you get Helman Mayonnaise Ghost, who is the worst of the Vampire Count's lords if you ask me. With him, you get the Strigoi Ghoul King Lord type, you get the Corpse Cart units, and the Mortis engines. All in all, this DLC is very mediocre. While the Corpse Carts and the Mortis engine units might be very useful to the Vampire Counts, they are definitely not essential. Same thing can be said for all of the Empire units. While they are okay, they're definitely not essential unless you are playing under very specific circumstances. Now, my personal recommendations for this tier, by the way, because I know I've mentioned a lot, so I'm just going to quickly go over 2 recommendations. And would you believe it's the 2 most recent DLCs, the Warden and the Paunch, and the Twisted and the Twilight. And that is because they bring new factions to Warhammer 2. If you just own Warhammer 2, buy these 2 DLCs. It is insane value for money. Not only do you get 2 new legendary lords, you know, you get one for a faction that is already in the game, but you also get an entirely new faction that is not in the game. So, you know, if you want to try the Wood Elves, you don't need to buy Warhammer 1 and the Realm of the Wood Elves, you buy the Twisted and the Twilight. If you want to try the Greenskins, you don't need to buy Warhammer 1, you just buy the Warden and the Paunch, and there you go, you get the entire Greenskin roster within that faction in the Vortex campaign, and that is insane value for money. Now, finally, we get to the piece of DLC that you should avoid at all costs. It's not going to take too long to get through these ones because you know what they are and you know why you should avoid them if you know anything about Warhammer 2. Now, first and foremost, we have the Blood for the Blood God DLCs. These are available for both Warhammer 1 and Warhammer 2. And they are not worth it at all. It is literally just cosmetic DLC that adds blood and some new animations to battles. That's it. There's nothing else, I promise you. The only way I can recommend you getting this is if you like to do cinematic battles and you like to make content using that. The blood does tend to make it look a lot more dramatic and it doesn't really affect you standing with the YouTube monetization thing. So that's the only way I can recommend it. Also, if you're a collector of DLCs, I can recommend it that way, and it's only a couple of quid. Apart from those, there's not really a point to it. Next up, we have the Call of the Beastmen DLC, which is again another Warhammer 1 DLC, so you need both games and then this DLC. But the Beastmen have yet to be reworked, unlike the Wood Elves, and unlike Norska, they do not hold up. The Beastmen, I know there's some people out there that play them and are really good at them and can win any campaign, but honestly, they're not good. They're terrible, they don't really have any mechanics. They've just been left behind the dust. They're not good, okay? Don't play the Beastmen, don't get this DLC, wait for Warhammer 3 to get reworked. And finally, we come to the Warriors of Chaos. Pretty much same story as the Beastmen. You need both the games and this DLC to unlock them. They have not been reworked, and they are not like Norska. They are not good, they do not hold up. They are kind of fun, but they're just boring as a faction. You're not really getting anything for your money. Just wait for them to get reworked with Warhammer 3, and then buy them, because then they'll be good. Oh my god, we've finally finished this video. It's taken far too long. My recording says that I've been going for like 44 minutes. I hope I managed to cut this down for the release of the video. No one's going to watch a video that is that damn long on all these DLCs. Yes, I hope this has been useful to you. Hope you now go away from this and now understand which DLCs are the best to buy. Yes, I believe that summarizes everything for now. So have a wonderful festive end to your day, and I will see you next turn.